Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch 2020, our new show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Damon Hatfield, and this week I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked, and Lucy O'Brien from IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond. This is going to be a powerful episode because Xbox boss Phil Spencer has officially unveiled the Xbox Series X specs and confirmed the console's long-rumored 12 teraflops. He also detailed some next-gen features that will be enabled by all those teraflops, which we'll get to in a bit. But first, I'd like to hear from Lucy. Now that we know the Xbox Series X boasts 12 teraflops, how do you feel about the PlayStation 5's rumored 9.2 teraflops?
All right, so let's just reiterate that this is a rumor,
right?
And has not been confirmed in any sense of the word. However, if it is boasting 9.2 teraflops, then I think we will likely see it at a lower price point. And I think actually that's going to be a massive deal for so many people moving into next gen. I think ultimately, we are still waiting on a whole suite of features, which has been promised by Jim Ryan, Sony CEO Jim Ryan, in February. He basically said we haven't really seen how the PlayStation 5 will differentiate itself from previous PlayStations. There's still so much to come. Now, obviously, Xbox is really owning the narrative right now. They've done a magnificent job at being very consumer friendly, especially with the smart delivery feature that they're promising. I think Sony will no doubt have a similar thing, but right now what Sony really needs to do is say how it's actually going to be different from the Xbox Series X. Right. And if it is 9.2 teraflops, then let's see that suite of features that's going to make it more appealing to consumers beyond raw horsepower.
Ryan, what do you think? Should Xbox fans be excited about 12 teraflops, and should they be worried if the PlayStation 5 comes in a lower price, even if it's less power?
Excited for sure. I mean, the Xbox One, we all know how poor a start it got off to this still current generation in 2013, which was in part due to it being underpowered. Of course, they really shot themselves in the foot by the fact that it was underpowered and $100 more thanks to the Kinect. So, that was a lethal 1-2 punch in the worst of ways. But this time around, I mean, it's 12 teraflops is just, they're not kidding around. Microsoft is determined to follow the path that they set on with the mid-cycle upgrade of the Xbox One X, which is definitively more powerful than the PS4 Pro as far as those mid-cycle consoles go. So they are going to have, if the 9.2 holds true on the PS5, they're going to be the objectively most powerful, best place to play your third-party multi-platform games. So as for the price, though, everything points to Microsoft trying to go with a divide-and-conquer strategy. Yes, the Series X is probably, being this much more powerful than the PS5, probably going to cost between $50 and $100 more, but Microsoft has a solution for that. Whether it works, how it pans out remains to be seen, but that is the so-called Project Lockhart machine, which on Podcast Unlocked, our weekly Xbox show, we've been calling the Series S, because they seem to really like the S and X thing. They've been rolling with that, so we've been calling it Series S. And that is the machine that is rumored to not have a physical media drive, a Blu-ray disc drive. So it'll omit that, be a streaming-only digital delivery box. Less powerful, maybe not really 4K, but a step up from the Xbox One X. But would probably slot both in price and power between the Xbox One X and the PlayStation 5. So they could have a both more expensive machine than the PS5 and a cheaper machine than the PS5. So it's going to be really curious to see how all of it pans out.
Well, the launch Xbox One was 1.3 teraflops, the Xbox One X is 6 teraflops, and the Series X is set to double that. That sounds pretty powerful, but how does it compare to a modern gaming PC? IGN's tech editor, Bo Moore, can explain.
First off, it's important to keep in mind that these raw number comparisons don't really tell the whole story, because a teraflop doesn't directly translate to X number of frames per second at Y resolution in a given game. Think of it more like a ballpark comparison. So right now, the best PC graphics card for gaming is the NVIDIA RTX 2080 Ti, which is capable of 14.2 teraflops. It also costs around $1,000, and that's just for the graphics card. The next step down, and the closest to the Series X in power level, is the RTX 2080 Super, which can do 11.1. That one costs about $700, and again, that's just for the graphics card. You still need a PC to put it in. Over on the CPU side, the Series X will rock a custom 8-core AMD Zen 2 chip. The cheapest AMD 8-core chip is the Ryzen 7 3700X. That one costs $300. So we're willing to bet that the Series X's brain is something more like the lower-end Ryzen 3, which is a quad-core chip, and only $80 off the shelf. AMD may just be bolting 4 more cores onto that design for Microsoft. Either way, considering those PC prices, getting a complete machine that produces 12 teraflops of power at $500 or even $600 really sounds like a steal, relatively speaking at least. It'll still be a pretty pricey console though. Back to you, Damon.
Thanks, Bo. And that brings us to this week's poll. Our question to you is, how prepared is your TV for next gen? Do you have one of those $60,000 98-inch 8K TVs from Sony or Samsung? Someone out there has to have one. They sell them at Best Buy.
Wow.
Does your current TV even do 4K? Make sure to vote at IGN.com and we will share the results with you next week. As for the results of last week's poll, I'm going to hand you over to Yusuf.
Last week, we asked the IGN audience how much they'd be willing to pay for the next-gen consoles, and it was not a close match for the top spot. Coming in at number 3, nearly 13% of you seem to have no concept of a dollar and care not about how much it'll set you back for the new consoles. Second on the list, 24% of you all would pay anywhere between $300 to $400, and taking the top spot, 44% of the voters are saying they would pay anywhere between $400 to $500 for the next-gen consoles, which, based on our speculations on pricing the components for the Xbox Series X and the PS5, falls in line with our guess that the next-gen consoles would cost at least $450. Are you guys surprised to see people will pay out more than $400 for the next-gen consoles?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. We talked about this last week, only because there's never been a really successful console launch that cost more than $400 previously. But I guess, times change, prices go up. Maybe people are just more accustomed to that price range now.
I mean, inflation. It is true that $400 in 2013 is, I think we did the math on this in the office recently. Don't quote me. It's somewhere around like $450 in 2020 dollars. So, things change, but the Xbox One X was $500, and I had thought that wasn't going to work out so well, and it totally worked out great for Microsoft. It's proven to be a great high-end box for the current cycle, so seems like the bar is moving up on the tolerable price scale.
Sure.
And I think as people are seeing what sort of modern PCs can actually do, with the promise that a console could potentially produce the power of a PC, I think people are more willing to pay money for that.
Yeah, for sure. Power of a PC at a much lower cost.
That's right.
All right, before we go, let's quickly discuss some next-gen features that are either confirmed or rumored. Sony has filed another patent, this time for an accessory that can attach to a PlayStation DualShock controller and sense the player's biometrics, such as heart rate or even sweat. I'm getting flashbacks to the Wii Vitality sensor. Lucy, Ryan, can you think of any cool applications for this feature? Why we would want to have our biometrics measured?
I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, Lucy, because I know you're more of a horror game fan than I am.
Yeah.
The first thing that came to mind was kind of a video game version of kind of like something out of the movie Saw, where it would measure your heart rate in a horror game, like a first-person horror game, and if your heart rate got too high, you'd be killed by whatever the horrible character that had captured you was. Sort of almost like a Keanu Reeves speed thing. Instead of having to keep the bus over 50 miles an hour, you had to keep your heart rate under 80 or whatever it was. So I could see some horror games maybe doing something cool with that.
Sure.
Definitely horror applications. There was actually a horror game that was kickstarted in 2015 called Nevermind. And it's available in the store, and it does exactly what you just described, Ryan, where essentially the more stressed you get, the harder the game gets, which I think is just so cruel. But yeah, I can definitely see it being used in those sorts of tense, sort of monster pursuing you driven survival horror games. But the wording of this particular patent also suggests that it was really being used with consideration towards VR to provide a more immersive VR experience. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that as part of a PSVR add-on.
Yeah, which we are waiting to see what Sony's VR plans for PlayStation 5 are. Now, one next-gen feature that is confirmed for Series X is Quick Resume, which allows you to re-enter suspended games with almost no wait times. This is one of the most exciting next-gen features to me. How do you guys feel about it?
I mean, it's absolutely great. The whole, one of the major quality of life offerings for this generation, Sony's mentioned it as well, Mark Cerny's mentioned it, but Microsoft's really been laying it out, is the severe reduction, if not altogether elimination, of loading times in every aspect of the experience. Whether it's dynamic latency input was one of the features that Xbox talked about, of sort of reducing the latency and lag time between the controller, the console, and the TV, just making it all as instantly responsive as possible. And this, and they're also using an SSD drive to try and reduce loading times in general across your games. So being able to hop in and out of multiple games at once with this Quick Resume just plays right into that, and I just love to see it. It's less time waiting around for your games and more time actually just getting in and playing your games. So it's great.
Yeah, in many games it's kind of going to make sort of checkpoints slightly redundant. I mean, obviously not like in a FromSoft game where checkpoints are very crucial to the actual experience, but it's going to be amazing to actually just be able to jump in where you left off without having to go back to a checkpoint and start from there. That's just going to be an amazing quality of life addition that I think, in 5 years, we're going to be like, we existed without that once upon a time.
And finally this week, Phil Spencer also announced Smart Delivery, which will allow games to be bought once and work across all compatible consoles despite being technically different versions of the same game. This will apply to all Xbox Game Studios titles, and developers can even apply it to games they release on Series X later than Xbox One. If you've been following Next Gen Console Watch since our first episode, you'll remember our first poll asked whether you plan to play Cyberpunk on current gen or wait until a next gen version arrives. But with Smart Delivery, you can buy it on Xbox One and it will just work on the Series X, and it will presumably look and run better on the next-gen hardware.
Yeah, it's great to see. I mean, this is what PC gaming is. If you have a Steam account and you log into your mom's, you go visit your mom and they have a crummy little kind of off-the-shelf PC that barely runs a game. It'll run low spec, but then you bring it home to your just ray tracing beast of a PC, it'll dial it up. So that's exactly what this is. So if you go ahead and buy Cyberpunk, CD Projekt Red's already confirmed that once their update is available, you don't have to pay anything. You've already got it, this is just how it should be. And I feel like, kind of like crossplay, I feel like Microsoft is, whether Sony wants to or not, they need to do this.
Yeah.
I suspect they probably are anyway. But they've got to now. I mean, otherwise, who's going to want to pay? Who's going to want to pay twice on a PS5 when you pay once on Xbox? So it's good. This is good for gamers. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, Sony absolutely has the architecture to do this, so there is no doubt in my mind that they will. I think this is the least we should be asking of consoles in 2020. And my sort of question with it at this point is how many third-party publishers are actually going to opt in, considering the huge amount of money that they can get from various re-releases, various Game of the Year editions. Are we even going to see those anymore? It's such a money-making sort of, I don't want to say scheme because it's not evil, but it's such a money-making thing for them. So I'm very interested to see how many people follow Cyberpunk's lead in this regard, CD Projekt's lead. I hope everyone does, but I'm also not going to ignore that they would be like flipping off cash on the table.
Yeah. But at least with Microsoft just throwing this out there, the developers and publishers that don't, Activision would probably be shamed. They're going to be shamed into doing it. The fact that everyone else is going to offer this for free. You're going to look like a real bad guy if you try to ask for another $60 from people.
Yeah. Well, as we keep getting all these exciting details about Xbox Series X, we're still waiting on concrete information about PlayStation 5. A lot of people thought that would be happening this month in February, but it's now
Let's
definitely
enjoy the 12 teraflops. This is great. this is Xbox's time.
Xbox having its moment of fun. Come on.
12 teraflops. That's a lot. There's a lot of RDNA 2 architecture. There's a lot to be excited about here.
Xbox fans are the Goonies. This is our time down here. And that will do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch 2020. Thank you, Lucy, Ryan, and Yusuf. And Bo. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more PS5 and Xbox Series X news. See you then.